Welcome, 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 Bitcoiners. The sun is super up. Bitcoin is running away from a bank run, and we're here to have some coffee and talk about what's new. Good morning, McTimmy. Good morning, Boo Boo Bodacious. Buenas, a Bitcoin graffiti. We got a great show. It's going to be a little different. We're all about the simulation today. The simulation is just like super winking today. We got a super winking simulation, so we're going to have fun with the simulation themes today because there's so much going on. But first, of course, we like a little Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. What do we got today? This is from Canada. Canada is just a unlimited wealth of clown world news, right? We can always get our best clown world news from Canada. So this is from the National Observer, and what they've decided is, and they've put a picture, like a cartoon of Jordan Peterson doing his like face, because that's part of the thing, right? So what we got here is that actually it's white men that are super spreaders of climate denialism. It's a pretty good headline. White men, they got the super spreader in there, and they got the denialism in there. It's all kinds of good stuff, right? So good for them. Here's another one. In case of flying and stuff, you got to be careful. This is from the Washington Post, that climate change is raising flight turbulence risks. Here's what you got to know. I didn't read the article. You can go read it yourself. I just loved the headline. It was too good. So yesterday, right, we had the bank run on Silicon Valley Bank, and we were talking about it 2 days ago as well with the Silvergate Bank. It's been a few now, but here's what I noticed. Here's a little simulation wink that I got, right? Here's what it looks like. Now, I did this the original time when Sam Bankman-Fried originally caused the collapse of crypto back in November. I was reminded of, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Maren Altman. So I booked her for a show years ago. I've always been a fan of horoscopes instead of technical analysis. That's just something that I personally like. And I'll even give you a little bit of a background story on that. We, at CoinDesk years ago, hired a technical analyst. Who's like super famous now, Omkar Godboil, right? He writes for everything. He's really good at his job. I love the guy. I was lucky enough one year he left India and came to New York, and we hosted him and had him involved in a show we put on. So he's, you've probably all heard of him. He's a great guy. When we hired him, it would have been 2017, I think. Everyone, whoa, because at the time CoinDesk, so it's CoinDesk who hired him. At the time, CoinDesk really was perceived in the market as like an engineering tech journal or something like that. It was really for engineers and some libertarians and all of that other stuff. So, which we were all into, but we knew this Wall Street thing was coming, and we were shifting content around to satisfy the Wall Street audience that was coming. And you gotta think of who's reading this stuff and grow your audience, of course. So we had a lot of macro themes now and all that stuff. And some of the early CoinDesk readers got pretty upset with us, right? They said, "Oh, what are you putting these technical analyst people in? Oh, it's all pseudoscience," which we're not denying, right? But my answer to that was simple. Newspapers have horoscopes and people love them. Right? This is just more horoscope stuff. It's just horoscopes, right? Just don't worry about it. It's horoscopes. If someone wants to say this is how people are feeling and Bitcoin is going to be like that tomorrow, great. Like I was fine with it, right? I wasn't insulted by it. So I've always kept the frame as horoscopes and technical analysis and price divination is all being sort of one category. Right? It's all one category. It's entertainment. It's fun. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But sometimes it works in the same way technical analysis works. Regularly, horoscopes work really well. And one of the most unbelievable examples you're ever going to hear started at a full moon / eclipse, which occurred last June 2022. So in June 2022, Maren Altman called it. She said, big trouble, because she does horoscopes, but also, Bitcoin and price and what's going on in the market stuff too. She combined the two things that I said should have been combined years ago. So you got to hand it to her for that. And so she predicted in 2022, right around the time of the full moon in June, that there would be big disturbances. It would be one of the big upheavals in the world. And actually, she pinned that eclipse, which happened during a full moon, to another full moon event, which occurred in November. So here's what she ended up pinning. She pinned it. We talk about pinning tops and bottoms when you're in technical analysis as markers. She pinned the Terra Luna. Remember Luna and all that Do Kwon stuff, right? The whole thing collapsed the night of that full moon in 2022, June 2022. And predicted, as I said, the whole story wouldn't end until the next eclipse full moon, which occurred on the day of the US midterm elections, which was also the day that SBF's fraud was made public and the whole thing collapsed. So no kidding, she predicted the full moon to full moon, collapse of stuff, changing of the world order, this and that. She picked it from June 2022 to the SBF collapse. I made a show using this eclipse at the time saying, and I believe I'm the first person to make the joke that Sam Bankman fried was an important simulation wink, that the Bankman got fried on that day. And it was part of this whole changing of the guard, changing of the world, everything spinning over, et cetera, et cetera. So now we come to this week. It was another full moon, but it didn't quite align with the bank fallout. But I decided to go have a look at Maren Altman's videos. I said, well, maybe she got something around this stuff. So it turns out that next week is the most powerful, coordinated new moon you can ever hope for. It's unbelievable in its consequences. So here's what we've got. The next new moon, so that'll be March 21st, coincides with, I guess, the Aries house and Mars being at 0 degrees. A bunch of stuff is at a new beginning. So it's a new moon, it's a new beginning, and it's the first day of spring this year, all coinciding on the first day, right? And the theory that she proposed, what it is the most powerful, clear signal of a new beginning that the stars could possibly align. There's no way to align stars in a more clear message that we are in a new beginning. Remember, it's the first day of spring. It's a new moon, so there will be no moon in the sky that night. And the alignment of the stars, in particular, our friend, the orange planet Mars. Mars is the the way it's aligned. I'm not an astrologer guy, so I just listen to the stuff, just like I'm not a TA, technical analysis guy. So I can't really give you the exact ups and downs. I just know that it's a pretty amazing coincidence. So here you go. You get the original eclipse, right, which was a blood eclipse, so it paints the moon a type of orange. So first of all, the moon went orange, right, on both of those eclipses, the June one and the November one. And then we've got the new moon coming up, which is in the house of Mars, so another orange planet, right? And it's the first day of spring. So what ends up happening here is it gets pretty crazy, right? So, and here's what Balaji wrote, right? So I stole the title from Balaji today. Uncle Sam is the new Sam Bankman-Fried, or as we say, Bankman-Fried. So here's what he says. What just happened? So he did the same what happened, right? Too long, didn't read. Tech ended up bailing out the government because tech deposits were used to buy billions in government bonds under false pretenses. So what they're talking about here are the divinations. We talk about TA, we talk about divinations, we talk about horoscopes. It's absolutely no different to how we analyze Fed Reserve, the Fed chairman. We talk about it a lot on the show, that the foundation of the fractional reserve banking system and the Fed Reserve system is a marketing tactic. It's all psychological operations. Shouldn't even be controversial, right? Both Bitcoin and the US dollar are psychological constructs. The foundations are different. One is built on words, fiat dictates things that come out of your mouth. Another is built on engineering. So one needs a megaphone, the other needs a broadcast capacity for the engineering alignment, right? But more or less, it's a broadcast situation, one with words, the other with the mathematical protocols. So here's what he says. It's actually very similar to FTX in that the entity which people trusted with their money was A, close to the US government, and B, told them it had the money right until it didn't. How SVP happened. And even just SVP, SBF, we're getting into, V and F is regularly the same, right? In pronunciation. First, the state set up fake accounting rules. Those rules allowed banks to tell customers that they had money when they did not have money. Two, next, the Fed suddenly sent interest rates to the sky after years of keeping them near zero, denying inflation was a problem and or telling the world inflation was transitory. Remember all the transitory stuff? It's transitory. Just like the mask, just like the vaccines, just like COVID, Bitcoiners did not need to adjust to this falsehood. We said immediately, there's no such thing. It's not transitory. Get real, right? Finally, banks that bought bonds under the Fed's misleading guidance got rug pulled. Skyrocketing interest rates meant the government bonds, where am I here? It meant the government bonds they bought just a few months ago were suddenly far less valuable. So that's why people don't have the money in their SVB accounts. All their capital was used to buy bonds from the government, and the government allows banks to legally lie about this in their accounting. Uncle Sam is the new Sam Bankman-Fried. So he brings up some old texts, right? The rules that companies exclude losses on their bonds from earnings if they classify the investments as available for sale or held to maturity. And he goes back and talks about December 13th, 2021, the Fed's inflation challenge, getting the policy and messaging right? Again, all about the messaging tactic and all of that kind of stuff. So we get this idea now that the Uncle Sam, right? And so it's not Sam anymore. It's now Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, Bankman-Fried. But here's the other thing. Remember we talk about the super fake news 60 Minutes show, right? Super fake news 60 Minutes, who actually did just finally do an amazing segment. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to talk about the stupid one they did last week. The only reason I even watched it last week is because David Byrne was on Talking Heads, the band. I'm a huge fan. And he's created a new show now called American Utopia about all the cool things that American startups do. And not anymore, I guess, because of Silicon Valley Bank. But just all of the innovation that goes on in America. He's not one of these pessimistic people. He's a super optimist. And so I love him for those reasons, right? And I loved his music. I don't know everything about the guy. I kind of lost touch. I just like the 80s music. But when I saw this and 60 Minutes was doing a thing on it, I just tuned in, not live, but I caught some of the replays just because I'm very curious about him. But it also turned out that our friend, the Fed chairman, Cash Carey, Cash Carey, the Fed chairman, they had him on the show too that week. And of course, he shit on Bitcoin, right? Of course he shit on Bitcoin. That idiot has nothing better to do. And what did he say about Bitcoin? He said, Neil Kashkari, Bitcoin has no usefulness, right? So it has no usefulness. He's got these really super crazy eyes too. He's always like, it has no usefulness, right? It has no usefulness. That's what he does. Has no usefulness. I booked him for a show years ago too, so I've met this guy. He's the Minneapolis Fed president. And so he also said that there's an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve and that this was the real point, right? It has no usefulness and there's an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. Now, do you know what the cash and carry trade is? Do you know what the cash carry trade is? It's what fried it. It's exactly what fried it. A cash carry trade is when there's an underlying difference between two different derivative markets or two assets. In this case, the bonds that were bought by Silicon Valley banks weeks ago, and the new bonds that are available now with a higher interest rate. So if you're trying to dump the bonds that you bought a little while ago, and they're only paying 1% interest, and then there's a 5% interest bond that you can buy over there, you get a cash carry trade immediately. So cash carry specifically told us that there's no usefulness to Bitcoin, and that it doesn't matter, the banking system is fine because they have an infinite amount of cash. He did not take into account the hoodwink cash carry trade of the underlying arbitrage between the different bond values. In 1 week, In 1 week, Neil Kashkari said probably the stupidest thing you'll hear this year on television, the stupidest thing you're going to hear this year on television, and it rhymes with his name. What the hell's going on here, right? And then what does it actually equal? What does the Kashkari trade actually equal? Well, the bonds are broken. Let me say it again. The bonds are broken. The dumbest trade you can make now is betting on the US government. The safest trade just a little while ago is now absolutely stupid. Absolutely stupid. Unless they bail it out. But if they bail it out, we're going to get into that. We're in an economic war right now. Right? America's position economically is strong right now because interest rates are up. Because they're up and high. And now, with the bonds being broken, we're in a totally different scenario, right? So you can thank Mr. Kashkari for this scenario. He went on 60 Minutes and said this out loud to the public, which is just amazing, right? Which is just amazing. So, but it gets better, right? It gets better. So when we talked about here this, so that's just what's going on in the markets, right? That's just what's going on. These are just coincidences. I mean, it's just simulation stuff, but it all kind of fits. It all kind of fits, right? So, but it goes further, right? So go back to this moon event, right? So it's one of these things where Mars and a new beginning in Mars. And according to Marin Altman, it actually rewards this new moon. It rewards people who have these big, lofty ambitions and big ideas. And who's got bigger ideas out there than the most synonymous person with the orange planet? Elon Musk. There's no one out there with bigger ideas. And Elon Musk did something pretty neat this week, which is he got himself involved with the QAnon Shaman story. Right? So we see Elon Musk jumping into all kinds of fires, all kinds of fights, all kinds of dust-ups on the internet. But this one is really interesting. So if you guys haven't been following, and I'm sure you have, I mean, I don't think I'm breaking news here, but you remember the QAnon shaman guy that everyone was talking about, that he was the main poster child for the entire January 6th narrative building operation about an insurrection and all these other things. And he was made to look like the craziest. He got 4 years in prison, the guy, right? But now we have all this exculpatory evidence and people are wondering if he gets retried. And we talked about it here first, right? We were immediately, the minute Tucker Carlson showed the videos, we said, this is crazy. He got a tour. We've seen more video come out now where he actually when he was in the Senate chamber and was on, because that was always what the insurrection was, of course, right? The QAnon shaman was actually using magic to take control of the largest military and nuclear power in the world because he was in a room. And the combination of the QAnon shaman and being in the room, this is the narrative. This is not my story. This is the narrative. The combination of him being in the room was enough to, I think, take over the country. Like the military would have to honor him now, I guess, because he was in the room and on the podium and had the lectern. The lectern's magic. And so that's the argument we've been told. There was no guns needed. The largest military in the history of the world was just going to bow to this guy because it was a revolution, right? It was an insurrection, right? He took control of the room. But we found out since that what he actually said when he was in there was he was praying for America and the people who were there, saying, oh, Heavenly Father, like a really calm talk, right? We've seen all the video of him with the police. There's a new video now of him outside trying to calm hooligans down, saying, Donald Trump told us to leave. We shouldn't even be here. If you're here for violence, get out of here. So Sticks, Hex, and Hammer mentions here this exact story. He says, the Jacob Chansley exculpatory evidence saga bothers and deranges the left because they spent 2 years carefully crafting a false narrative. And that narrative's central goal was to bring forth a prelude to attacking Trump. Undermine the narrative, and the whole blue anon world comes crashing down. And indeed, that's kind of what we've seen now. And Elon Musk jumping into this is pretty neat. So here's what Elon Musk has been tweeting, right? Here's what he's been tweeting. He says, Chansley got 4 years in prison for non-violent police escorted tour. And now Elon Musk is being fact-checked from that tweet. He put that on, what do you call it? He also put that, people put that tweet on Instagram, the other thing. I don't use Instagram, so I don't know much about it. But he put it on Instagram and it started getting fact checked, right? So here are the fact checks. This is from Lead Stories, fact checked. No evidence. Jacob Chansley, the QAnon shaman, was led through Capitol by police the entire time he was in the building on January 6th is not true. PolitiFact, false. Evidence rebutes Tucker Carlson's claim about Capitol Police acting as tour guides to QAnon shaman. The AFP fact check. Tucker Carlson falsely claims police helped the Trump supporter, right? So it goes on and on and on. Now, here's what Ian Martezus said about it all, right? He goes, if the simulation really prefers the most entertaining deploy, which I've argued many times, it's the Elon Musk version of the Occam's razor, right? That history and the future bends towards what's most entertaining, right? Towards what's most entertaining. Says the following, if the simulation really prefers the most entertaining deploy, then the QAnon shaman may in fact expose and topple the deep state via these videos. That's some strong medicine. And I'm leaning towards that being true. Like, I think it could happen. They spent so much time with an absurd story, and the visuals were so powerful of this guy with the buffalo horns. I mean, the image of him is why he became a target. Now, I don't know if you've seen him from prison, but he ain't the same fella. I don't know if you've seen it. He is now a meek, skinny, he looks, because he's shirtless, he looks like he's been eating well and taking care of himself. I guess he was in the army for a while too. So he's just a healthy looking fella when he's got the tattoos and everything. And now if you would see him, he looks like a meek, skinny, unhealthy human being. So the videos here on all levels are pretty powerful, pretty arresting. Let me just see if how my audio is doing here. Okay, good. So there you go, right? This is some pretty interesting stuff. And indeed, if the simulation does prefer these kinds of deploys, what's most entertaining, we might just have something really special on our hands here with the QAnon shaman. He's a shaman of all things, right? A shaman. What else does America need, right? So that's just one thing, right? So him getting involved, Orange Man, right? This is a Trump thing too. Orange Planet, Elon Musk around the story, definitely paying attention to it. I don't think we're going to be able to ignore it. You know, the old Bill Clinton 48-hour rule. So Bill Clinton had a really clever rule on how to manage all the media antagonism that he had, all the trouble that he had back in the 90s. And it was ride it out for 48 hours. If it's still in the news, then you need a strategic countermeasure. But in general, he said, I don't care about 48-hour trouble. I can live with that, right? So it's been a rule of thumb for many people since, because, of course, the Clinton White House is one of the first modern examples of how to manage the 24-hour news cycle and ride it and survive in it and thrive in it. So Clinton did that, and now that we get all of this energy around the QAnon shaman, it's well past the 48-hour mark. But again, it's a bit of the Lindy effect, right? The amount of attention that was showered on QAnon, the amount of words, just like in the fiat system, the amount of words that were used to prop this guy up and mythologize him in the first place could be the very reason why there's a downfall later on, right? So these things are definitely related. So amazing stuff, right? Amazing stuff. And again, we're dealing with the Orange Man, the Orange Planet guy, and of course the Orange coin, right? So that's heavily involved in all of this simulation winking stuff, right? Remember, we're just talking about simulation winks. It's a fun episode today, right? This is not, don't use your logic brain. Put that aside today, right? This is just for fun. Streisand effect. Yeah, Streisand effect. Yeah, I mean, Lindy effect as well, in the sense that however long you are famous for, you'll be famous for that long. So it's a little bit of, of course, the Lindy effect that we talk about in Bitcoin so much actually just comes from comedians in the 1950s and conversations around fame and popularity when television was starting. And the Lindy effect is literally comedians saying, well, if you've been in the public eye for this long, you will be in the public eye for this long. The way up is the way down, right? As above, so below. So it's just it comes from that, right? It comes from attention. It comes from all those things. So the Lindy Streisand effect, yeah, and I definitely do mean the Streisand effect. It's when you give attention to something, but this was a little bit different, right? This was a little bit different. So there you go. But we're not done, right? We're not done. There's more to it. So this is the Bankman, this is the markets, this is cash carry, this is all that stuff. But it gets much better. I mentioned to you guys a little while ago that Bobby Kennedy Jr. Is thinking about running for president. Right? He's thinking about running for president. This is the firstborn son of the assassinated former Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, who was the younger brother of the president who was also assassinated, John F. Kennedy, assassinated in 1963. The effects and the changes really came in 1964. If you follow the framework of the fourth turning, you'll know that 1963 to 1964 was the big change in America. It was the end of the golden era, the epoch that immediately begins at the end of our last crisis, which was World War II. So we go from the end of an era, and then everything cut short with JFK getting shot. And what happened in 1964 is the beginning of Vietnam, the beginning of all this bank secrecy stuff, right? The beginning of all of the weaponization of the banks, the weaponization of the federal government for political purposes, and the beginning of the project that LBJ had, which was the Great Society, which was a huge public spending operation. They spent tons of money creating narrative control. PBS comes from there. NPR comes from there. Subsidies towards other news outlets come there. The CIA, many people believe, right? Many people believe were heavily involved in what happened with Kennedy and everything that happened after, LBJ included. LBJ was a very corrupt politician, right? Died with millions and millions of dollars. In that period, LBJ, some people say, got into the spying on finances of Americans because they wanted to suppress protests of Vietnam, anything that could have happened with people looking into the JFK thing, everything that goes on with that. So now there was a story this week as well where he's on Fox News, Judge Napolitano, or he's like a judge that goes on TV all the time and has a show on Fox, but he was really good friends with Donald Trump. And he was asking Donald Trump. So years ago, Donald Trump told him, they used to talk on the phone a lot. Donald Trump told him, I'm going to get rid of all of the, I'm going to make public all the JFK files, right? He said that. I'm going to make them all public. And he asked the judge if that was a good idea on the phone. And the judge says, not only is it a good idea, I'm going to keep reminding you to do it in case you flake out. So in the last days of the Trump presidency, January 6th has already happened. It looks like he's out. It's over, right? What's his name went to him, the judge, went to Trump and said, hey, what happened here? Let's get these things out before you're out. And his answer, so the judge just made this public this week, his answer was the following. When Trump answered back, he said, if you would have seen what I saw, you wouldn't have released it either. That's what he said. That's what Trump told him. And he has now said that publicly, shared it publicly, right? He said publicly, this is what Trump told me. If you'd have seen what I saw, you wouldn't have made it public. So what could it be? We can only speculate, right? But I think when you understand the forces that are out there, those forces that were willing to kill JFK about what? He was going to destroy the Federal Reserve. He was going to destroy the CIA. Those were the things he said in 1963 before he was killed. He was going to destroy the information laundering system and the financial kleptocracy which existed. Those were the two things, those were the two big policy proposals he said before he died, right? So at that point, you get, we're dealing with some pretty big stuff here. So, I've always wondered, I would forgive Trump. I would forgive Trump for the Snowden, Assange debacle, right? I'm still not a Trump supporter because of his last day in office. Not pardoning these people to go to war for him, which they would have done, right? Because their enemies are the same. My enemy is your enemy in this case, which is why I predicted he was going to pardon them. And I was wrong, right? And he should have pardoned everyone involved in January 6th. So Trump made a lot of mistakes here. But now just imagine, right? Just imagine when you think you're the president, you think you're powerful, and then you find out exactly what happened to JFK. Was he as powerful as JFK? Of course not, right? Most of the country hated him, whereas everyone loved JFK. Right now, and you start wondering why Trump's family is not getting involved in Trump campaign too, right? Maybe it's just because everyone hated them. They're sick of that stuff. That could be it. That could be it. But you got to wonder. You got to wonder about feeling vulnerable. You got to wonder about, well, maybe they'll let me live, right? You got to wonder about that stuff. And I thought at the time even, that's the only way I could forgive Trump is if he really was just scared, right? And I would understand why someone would be afraid of that. It's scary. Now, I've always thought you should just do it for the betterment of humanity and all that. But honestly, go back to all these politicians. We've been hearing about Elizabeth Warren this week, who might have caused this thing, by the way, right? She started the bank run on Silvergate. So just think about Elizabeth Warren again, right? She makes what, $250,000 a year as a senator, and now everyone talking about her $400 million net worth. Right? You can go across all these politicians, and it's the same, especially the presidents. What is Obama worth now? He gets the $400,000 speaking opportunities, the $1 million speaking opportunities, the multi-million-dollar Netflix deals, right? We talked this week about what American elite really means. And of course, Trump is not elite, right? He has some money, but he's not elite. They hate him. And if you look at these presidents since LBJ died with $100 million in their money. And he said it was all his wife and her radio station that made it all. So he's the original start of the golden age of fraud. Biden is probably the greatest benefactor, maybe the Bushes. There's other people out there who have definitely benefited. But think of all these presidents that have no reason to have money. They shouldn't have money. They're not rich. The job they do is not high paying. And yet they leave office with hundreds of millions of dollars. Trump is the only president who lost money, and he has no prospect of making any more money like he did. He can grift with NFTs and he can grift with his people, but he's the grifter of grifters, right? He's a grifter's grifter. So we forgive him for what he does. I still think the NFT thing was clever as heck after the fact. I laughed at him first thinking it was stupid, but it worked out with him in the end. So think about for a second everything that Trump went through. He's become poorer. So he is definitely part of a new phenomenon that we haven't seen since the LBJ times about presidents and their wealth and where it comes from and why we would even have spying on the financial system in the first place, because don't want to talk about the politicians making a ton of money, right? And that's kind of the logic. It's probably that simple, right? LBJ didn't want people complaining about Vietnam. He wanted to start doing what we saw in Canada, attack the finances of the protesters during the trucker thing. Right? That's all part of the same narrative. The only reason it was reflexive in Canada to make me a terrorist and to make others terrorists was because they could. Everything was in place already. It was like, okay, we'll just do that. Remember, they had a governor of the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, who's probably going to run for Prime Minister of Canada if Trudeau can't make it to the line next time, who just openly said, yeah, just guys, come on, just go, follow the money, go in the bank, get the bank, stop the protesters. We got to go to work. We got to get our coffees in Ottawa. We got to go to our stupid fake jobs and our stupid fake buildings that don't do anything. And these protesters are in the way and they're loud with the honking. Remember, the honking shall not stop until freedom improves, right? So there you go. So now put all that in context, right? Is there a person other than Trump? I think this is the only person in the world, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has a claim to rectify this whole narrative that's been going on since 1963-64, a moral claim to doing it. And he's a lot more unifying than Trump in some ways. Now, I'm kind of for destroying political parties. I don't want charismatic leaders. I don't want people who are going to get stuff done. I like a fight. But we are at a fourth turning, and you can imagine a party getting wiped out and an idea getting wiped out at this point. And Bobby Kennedy might be the guy to do it, right? He just might be. Now, I don't know. He's got his own, he has some credibility issues on some levels, but still, at the same time, we can imagine that his intentions look pretty good, right? And again, he was fighting the fight. He was one of the first people to be ringing the alarm against Fauci. And now we've seen, I see in the comments here, um, no, Bobby would definitely run for Dems. Definitely. Um, yeah. No, LBJ took the silver coins out, right? He took the silver coins out for sure, right? He did, absolutely did. Yeah. No, it was in 1968 was the end of the silver coins. Once at an arcade, they gave me a whole rack of them. You used to give them $10 and you'd get a stack of coins at the arcades in the 90s. I got a whole stack once of silver quarters by accident. I still have them. Yeah, this is the one I wanted to see. Joe Biden had been caught yesterday in hearings, exactly, asking Twitter to ban Bobby Kennedy for COVID tweets. That's exactly what I'm saying, right? That Bobby Kennedy is somehow involved in all of this stuff. So LBJ, JFK, we need to go back that far in the story because the corruption of the American system does begin then. That's when the real edifice of the communications system that created this collusion between private interests, public interests, really took shape and took form. There were proto versions of it before because of the war effort, the military-industrial complex, but the military-industrial complex hadn't morphed into the censorship industrial complex, which promotes the military-industrial complex in its own way. And so now that's where we're at. So I do think you need to go back and be able to frame things for the 2024 election in terms of what happened in 64. Exactly 60 years later. Exactly 60 years later is what we're dealing with, right? So that's also significant. We're dealing with exactly a 60-year cycle here. So here he is. He's asking people to volunteer and contribute. If it looks like I can raise the money and mobilize enough people to win, I'll jump in the race. If I run, my top priority will be to end the corrupt merger between state and corporate power that has ruined our economy, shattered the middle class, polluted our landscapes and waters, poisoned our children, and robbed us of our values and freedoms. Together, we can restore American democracy. It's pretty good stuff. I mean, it's pretty good stuff, right? Now, things get a little better too if we keep going here, right? So it's not just about the economic war. It's not just about what's going on with LBJ and the spying on our banking and all of those things. With everything going on with China, as I mentioned, of course they're salivating, right? Of course the Russians are salivating with this new economic crisis and perhaps the inability of the American system to be competitive and to be hamstrung in this way. So from that, you can think of, where is it? Let me get my stuff in order. I was a little late today because my Saturdays, I get the kids ready for ballet. Let me find it here. So, well, I'll just have to wing it. Oh yeah, no, here it is. This is what I wanted. Yes. So here's where it is, right? This is from Naval, again, going back and talking about where is Powell? Where is Yellen? This is so David Sachs. Where is Powell? Where is Yellen? Stop the crisis now, right? Because America is literally, if you look at what's going on with the startups, now, most of these startups are bullshit, right? It's climate tech stuff. It's all the people that, what are you doing, right? So, but some of them, of course, you don't want to just see, you want to have some empathy. You don't want to see people not knowing where their paycheck comes from. And that's where we're at, right? So, and they're talking about contagion, right? How far it can go. So Naval says the following: if businesses lose money on deposit, then every business in the country will move all cash above $250,000 into Treasury, which is what the FDIC insures for, right? $250,000 per person. And we'll have a system-wide bank run at Twitter speed. Then they'll tell their banker, the only counterparty I want is the U.S. Treasury, right? Imagine the only counterparty that people have is the U.S. Treasury. That would be like banking with the U.S. government. That would be CBDCs, right? That's more or less a CBDC. That's what we're talking about here. In the end, that's what we're talking about is CBDCs. If it's a treasury or whatever, right? But Because of that, because of this loaning money to a bank, the fractional reserve system, do you go with a CBDC? So now it becomes, if the fractional reserve system uh, isn't going to work, it's going to be a CBDC. And David Sachs gets to the point here. He says the idea that depositors are creditors. Remember, the way the fractional reserve system works is the following, right? When you make a deposit, you become a creditor to the bank. It creates a debtor-creditor relationship in all instances because the money itself is debt, right? So either you're lending it to that person or they're lending it to you. That's why in the fractional reserve system that we have and the fiat system that we have right now, you can't actually tell the difference between wealth and debt. They look identical, right? A wealthy person could just be someone who has a huge line of credit, right? It doesn't mean they're wealthy at all, right? This is not a proof of work system yet. So here's what he's saying. The idea that depositors are creditors to a bank is an absurd and outdated notion. Everyone just wants a checking account, not to loan the bank money. And so he says the solution is for FDIC to offer a category of insurance where one, deposits are fully protected, banks are restricted, blah, 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 blah. But the simple thing is what he said, right? That people don't want to lend banks money. They just want an account, a checking account. Now, I helped create an actual version of this for Kraken, right? So that was the whole point of our bank experience. We leveraged an ancient form of law called bailment, right? It's an old idea, and it's what the banks use with the Federal Reserve, the commercial banks use with the Federal Reserve for the actual repo market and for trading treasuries for cash. The reason is they put a promise of an interest rate on top of it, but it doesn't create a debtor-creditor relationship. It's a straight swap, right? Treasuries for dollars, swap them, and then the Federal Reserve has to forward the money the next day, which is the overnight interest rate, which is the foundation of our entire economic system, right? It's the entire foundation of it. So what I did, and what Caitlin Long has been doing, and what Kraken has been talking about for years, was to create these bailment contracts, which again do not establish a creditor-debtor relationship with the depositor and the bank. They're just checking accounts. And if you think of fungibility, of course, right? So if you put one Bitcoin in, you can get that one Bitcoin out. That's exactly the same Bitcoin that you put in. Not another Bitcoin, not another one from a pool, not a commingled deposit account, and some of it comes in and some of it comes out. The bank has to be 100% backed by deposits. All things, and they're not on the balance sheet of the bank. The bank is there as a custodian and a security guard, more or less. And so many people in Bitcoin thought this was the only way forward because it establishes the old world of free banking again, where the banks actually just do their job, right? That's why it's illegal to put cash in a safety deposit box. You can't do that, right? That's part of the fractional reserve system. So you're not allowed to do that. And that's why we created the bank in the first place. So we invented the chart, we invented the category of bank, which we thought was going to bring advantages because we couldn't take on we couldn't make loans, right? We don't have the ability to do maturity transformation with deposits. We can't take your deposits and then loan to people. That doesn't work. So we had to do it this way. And, you feel handcuffed, but we were fine, right? We would migrate people to trade accounts if they wanted to trade and be degenerates. But if they just wanted to save money, they could, right? That was the whole business proposition. If you want to save your money, you can do it, right? You can do it here. These are, and the difference is when you go bankrupt, if Kraken went bankrupt, all depositors would get their money back. There's no way to not. We don't have access to it. We can't do anything to it. We can't trade it. We can't lend it. We can't do anything. And that's just not the case in a normal bank, right? They have to pay their staff before they pay depositors. That's the way it works with these credit relationships. So remember, and this is another simulation link. Remember, originally, when everyone was talking about the election fraud in 2020, before the QAnon Shaman, remember what it was supposed to be. The proof that the election was stolen was the Kraken. It was the Kraken, right? It was the monster. It was the Kraken. And I'm sitting there saying, and I know already at the time, because my job at Kraken during the 2020 election, part of it had nothing to do with the 2020 election, but part of what I did for the strategy team for Jesse Powell was paying attention to SBF because FTX came out of nowhere. And I said, what the fuck? what's going on here? And I was the only one who had ever had any contact with him before, because I was looking into it on BitMEX and who he was and booking him for shows if I could, because I just didn't know what was going on, why he was so successful, why they were making money. So I was reaching out to him. And I reached out and at Kraken got this assignment. It wasn't a special assignment. It was like, hey, market size these competitors and have a look and what's going on. And I found out the political stuff. I found out the Biden donations. I found out the prediction market that he used, which ended up being heavily cited in the media as cognitive closure. Look, the unsentimental people said Biden won, right? Unsentimental, they said, right? Well, I knew he was the biggest Biden donor outside of America in the world at the time already. So I said, this is not unsentimental. These people are in the bag. And you couldn't talk about it. So as I'm listening, the Kraken is there. I'm working at Kraken saying, well, I know the answer. Like, this is pure corruption, right? This prediction market was used as a messaging tool to flip the election. And now they're illegal. You can't do election prediction markets anymore. Done, right? No excuse given, no reason given, right? This was before SBF was caught. And I'm telling you that I made predictions at the time when the prediction markets were shut down that he was going to start influencing more markets to his benefit. And I said, well, this guy's got to be destroyed. It's got to be destroyed, right? So here's where the story gets fun, though. So everyone asking, just like David Sachs, for these new bank accounts, for these this new banking system to come to America. Well, of course, now Jesse Powell, the person who runs Kraken and is now offering this actual service, the remedy to what Jerome Powell, both JPows, are offering. So the battle for banking in America, just in terms of personalities, right? Now, the Jerome Powell thing is much bigger. He's the chairman of the Fed. But this other guy who runs the only free bank in America, the only free bank, and there's one, right? Caitlin it's not as up and running, but he's said already this week and last week they're going ahead with the bank. They're going to do it. They're going to make the first private bank. They haven't been able to because everyone's suing the Federal Reserve. It's political, blah, blah, blah. We should have been running years ago, right? I had already lost faith in our partners, the Federal Reserve of Kansas City. By then, I'd already, within a year, understood these guys were just screwing us and dragging us along, and it was all bullshit. It was more lawyers, more crap. And, I kind of lost faith in the ability for it to work quickly. And you don't want to just sit on your thumbs all day, right? So, but go back to the election. Kraken, Jerome Powell, Jesse Powell, fighting for the future of banking in America, fighting for how it will look. Will Jerome Powell bail the system out again and put the country into a strategic corner militarily, economically? Or will it be a free banking system with, guess what, Jules and proof of work? Jules, of course, is another measurement for kilowatt hours, or the backing of energy, the backing of money with energy, right? That's Jules' proof of work. Jules' proof of work is kilowatt hours and the proof of work of the Bitcoin system related to it. So no kidding. Jerome Powell versus Jesse Powell, JPow, Jules' proof of work, and the battle for the future of the American system. It's all there. It's all here. Cash Carry's involved. Sam Bankman-Fried is involved. Uncle Sam Bankman-Fried is involved. Kraken is back in the game. We got moons involved. Bitcoin goes to the moon, as we know, right? The orange planet is involved. Well, we love orange planet. We love everything orange. We love orange, right? And Jerome Powell, Jesse Powell, Jules, proof of work. There it is. Everything you need to know. Everything you need to know. Let me see some of these. Is Bobby a Bitcoiner? Don't know if Bobby's a Bitcoiner. I believe he'll embrace it. I'll try and lobby the guy if I can. If he has to pick up some of his uncle's old policies, I'm sure he'll become a fan. I just listened to Safe's interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. Oh yeah, I wonder how it went. I bet you it was really interesting and good. I haven't listened. I'm a fan of both, though, that's for sure. Still trying to confirm Vivek for Bitcoin Miami, May 18th to 20th. I hope so. Joe Biden. Oh yeah, we saw that one. Thank you, Mudcast, for that. Judge Meatball. Yeah, I don't know his name. I don't know his name. Didn't LBJ also take silver dollar coinage off the market a few years? Yeah, 65. Oh, okay, it was 65. Sorry, 68 was my mistake, Daniel. I think I confused it with Canada for the moment. We did the same, but just a few years later. He didn't handle COVID-19 very well either. Yeah. I can't forgive Trump. Eisenhower had some gun to his head and called out the. Yeah, I know. I'm not forgiving him. It's a question of understanding why he made the choice, right? I am still no Trump. I still don't really get it. I just mean I can be a little more empathetic towards him in this case. He's a human being, right? And look, your kids are like, it's not just himself. Your kids get threatened. These are some mean people. And as I said, what does it mean when he says you don't know what I saw? It's not the horrifying nature of what he saw. I don't think. I mean, I think it is once you if you're the president and then all of a sudden you realize that you're not even close to the most powerful man in the world despite your stuff and that people can get to you anywhere. It's scary. I mean, think about that for a second, right? If you're the president and you understand you couldn't even protect your kids, that would be hard. That would be hard. That would be hard. Daniel, and he's still pro-vax now. Yeah. No, I know. He's look again. Trump has many problems, right? Many problems. Uh, yeah, Biden's never done anything else. I think Bobby runs for the Dems. That's what he's saying. I don't think a Kennedy can run for the Republicans. It just doesn't fit, there. Oh, okay, guys, I think I got to go. I got my family back. Okay. See ya. Peace.